This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The death toll rises to 71 as a commission is set up to probe Tanzania's fuel tanker tragedy. Dozens killed as typhoon Goma moves up China's coast. And a big day for millions of Muslims across the world celebrating Eid al-Adha. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. G7 countries and the IMF to support China against currency manipulation claims by the US. And in sports, a group of Egyptian footballers with dwarfism itching for competitions to prove their mettle. In our top story, Tanzania is in mourning after a crashed fuel tanker exploded as crowds rushed to recover leaking petrol. So far, 71 people have been confirmed dead from the incident. President John Magufuli visited some of the 59 survivors who had been transferred to a hospital in Dar es Salaam. The deadly blast, which took place near the town of Morogoro, is the latest in a series of similar disasters in Africa. CGTN's Dina Matengo has the story.
President John Magufuli has called for people to stop the dangerous practice of stealing fuel during tanker accidents. This is a common event in many poor parts of Africa. He declared a period of mourning through Monday. There are 59 patients still in hospital after the tragedy. The patients have been transferred to Dar es Salaam, where some remain in very serious condition, according to the doctors who accompanied the president. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Kassim Majaliwa announced on Sunday that a special commission would be established to investigate if any management failures had contributed to the disaster. Witnesses say the truck tipped over while trying to avoid a motorcycle. Drivers of motorcycle taxis as well as locals then flocked to the scene to collect fuel. According to the region's governor, the explosion was triggered when a man tried to retrieve the truck's battery, creating sparks that ignited the fuel. Authorities say DNA tests will be carried out on bodies that were no longer recognizable. Families can then take the remains of their loved ones and organize their own burials. Similar fuel incidences have been occurring throughout Africa. Last month, 45 people were killed and more than 100 injured in central Nigeria when a petrol tanker crashed and then exploded as people tried to take the fuel. In May, a similar incident occurred in Niger, just a short distance from the airport in the capital Niamey, leaving almost 80 people dead. Another 292 people lost their lives in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo in July 2010, and in September 2015, at least 203 people died in the South Sudan town of Maridi. Dina Matengo, CGTN.
Well, let's get to the very latest now on the tragedy in Tanzania. We're joined by CGTN's Isaac Lukando, who is in Dar es Salaam. Isaac, of course, as we understand, some of the victims were buried yesterday. Are there plans for more burials today?
Well, yes, it is true that the majority of the dead were buried yesterday, but since the government had organized for relatives to be able to identify their loved ones, upon identification they would allow the relatives to take their bodies, and so we presume that some of the burials will be happening today. These are private burials for people who are able to take their relatives, but the majority of the burials did happen yesterday.
Now, we know that, of course, the death toll has risen. As of this morning, it reached 71, and, of course, another 59 people still in hospital. What can you tell us about the condition of the survivors?
Well, the government is really focusing keenly on helping the injured recover. 43 of the 59 injured have been taken to the National Hospital here in Dar es Salaam, the commercial capital of Tanzania, to receive further care. And with the President's visit to the National Hospital yesterday, he urged doctors there and specialists to ensure that the injured get the very best of care possible, and that the government would be footing the bill for all those injured.
And we know the government, of course, is planning to set up a commission to investigate the tragedy. Isaac, what will this commission be looking into, and how long will this inquiry take?
Well, the Prime Minister of Tanzania yesterday, Kassim Majaliwa, was talking about this in his address to mourners. He was saying that they are establishing a commission. It has yet to be named, or the composition is yet to be known or made public. But essentially, they are going to be looking at culpability on the part of government authorities, if there was any laxity somewhere, if something could have been done to reduce the high number of deaths that occurred in the aftermath of the overturning of the oil tanker. And so the commission will be tasked with finding out the truth and seeing where the government can take action after recommendation. And so this commission is supposed to come back with the findings no later than Friday of this week.
And it's hoped, of course, the outcome of that commission will help prevent further incidents of this nature. Thank you so much, Isaac Lukando, joining us there from Dar es Salaam. Now, another news, rocket fire launched on civilians and Libya's Mitiga airport has violated a temporary truce between the UN-backed government and forces loyal to Khalifa Haftar. Tripoli's government has blamed Haftar's rival army for the strikes, saying they've broken the truce of al-Adha. Since early April, the government has been engaged in a deadly armed conflict against the army, which is trying to take over the capital, Tripoli. The fighting so far has killed more than 1,000 people. Thousands of others have been injured and even more displaced from their homes. Libya has been struggling to make a democratic transition amid insecurity and chaos ever since the fall of former leader Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. Now to news further afield, Hong Kong police have released evidence of recent attacks on officers, showing protesters throwing petrol bombs during clashes.
These violent demonstrators threw petrol bombs at officers and a police station. They threw the bombs at police in Tseung Sha Wan, one of which exploded in front of an officer. The flames were as high as a human's height. The photo here shows a rioter attacking a police officer in Tsim Sha Tsui with what is suspected to be a gun. The actions from these rioters are the total opposite of what they promised. We have no choice but to use force to disperse them in order to protect citizens and other police officers.
Our reporter Shui Huao tells us more about Sunday's protests.
Several attacks on police were reported during Sunday's protests in Hong Kong. In Tsim Sha Tsui, one officer sustained burns on both legs after being hit by a petrol bomb. And near Tseung Sha Wan, another officer was injured while chasing a bomb thrower. Speaking by telephone, one injured police officer spoke out.
While we were dispersing the protesters, they threw petrol bombs at us. They didn't hit us directly. After we moved in to arrest them, my right knee hit something hard and I felt intense pain.
The protest took place despite a police ban, and many shops in the affected areas were closed.
When I saw a fellow officer get injured, I felt helpless and upset, because you don't know who is going to be hurt next. It could be another colleague or yourself. We don't want anyone else getting injured.
The increasingly violent demonstrations have pushed the city towards what the SAR government calls an extremely dangerous edge.
If this is a peaceful demonstration, we would definitely respect it. But we, the police officers, are on the front line. And based on our observations, this is by no means a peaceful protest. The protesters are trying all possible means to destroy facilities and even attack the police.
The protests aren't just in the streets, but the airport as well. Sitting protests in the Hong Kong International Airport lasted 3 days over the weekend. Over 1,000 black-clad protesters swarmed the arrival hall, all chanting anti-government slogans. Meanwhile, Hong Kong-based airline Cathay Pacific says it has suspended one pilot charged with rioting. The pilot was arrested on July 28th. He returned to work after being released on bail, but Cathay Pacific says he has not been assigned to a flight since July 30th.
Anytime you have a pilot from any airline who's arrested for violence in a riot or any kind of violence, every country that I know, and probably every airline, will suspend the pilot, and eventually, if he's proved guilty, will usually be fired. And the safety is very important for every airline, and it's very important that you have a pilot who is not involved in or doesn't get emotional. Sometimes you don't think, and your emotion takes over. But as a pilot, you should be very disciplined and stick to your job. That's the most important thing.
The ongoing protests have rocked Hong Kong for 9 consecutive weeks. They have not only undermined social order, but have also hampered mainland Hong Kong exchange, with hundreds of flights being cancelled and the tourism industry seriously affected. Experts say the crisis is compounding an economic downturn Hong Kong was already experiencing. Tu Huiao, CGTN, Beijing.
And in China, the super typhoon Likima has now been downgraded to a tropical storm. It is moving further up China's eastern coast, however, after making its second landfall on Sunday night, this time in Shandong province. 5 people have been reported dead, with another 7 still missing in Shandong. Local authorities say 26 reservoirs have opened their floodgates to release water. 6 rivers in the province have already been flooded. Likima first landed in Zhejiang province, much further to the south, and 38 people were killed there. 10 people are still missing. So far, the typhoon has affected more than 6 million people and halted flights, ferries and train services. Over 1 million people have been forced to relocate. Time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. A big day for Muslims across the world celebrating Eid al-Adha. And a focus on bulletproof backpacks to guard against shootings in the United States.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Muslims around the world are celebrating Eid al-Adha, also known as the Festival of Sacrifice. During this time, families gather to eat meat from animals that have been symbolically sacrificed to their God to commemorate the sacrificial devotion of Prophet Ibrahim. According to the legend, the Prophet was challenged by God to prove his faith through sacrifice. It is one of the most important festivals for Islamic followers and marks the end of the annual Islamic pilgrimage to Mecca in Saudi Arabia. It's celebrated at the same time when many Muslims perform the Hajj pilgrimage. Now, in Syria, sadly, the celebrations of Eid al-Adha have been trumped by war. Thousands of people remain displaced and live in dire conditions. Let's take a look.
While across the world Muslims celebrate Eid al-Adha, Syrians living in Atma displacement camp in Aleppo's countryside have other concerns. It's a time to mourn and reflect on their hardships as they struggle to make life better.
But it became just a normal day for us. Nobody is feeling happy. Since we were forced to leave our homes, 4 Eids have passed. We don't really feel it because nobody is happy since we lost our village. No person who has lost neighbors or relatives can be happy.
We used to have a joyful Eid, full of happiness with our families, before the war. After we were displaced from our homes, Eid became a tragedy for us. Eid is like any other day now. There is no happiness or joy. It is a tragic Eid.
We were living in our properties and lands. We were happy because we had money. Then we were forced to leave our homes. We have nothing. We are not happy at all. We are sad and thinking about our life.
Their sentiments represent millions of Syrians who were forced to flee their homes during the war. The Syrian government and its allies recently started a new offensive aimed at recapturing the last rebel-held territory in the northwest of the country. Many hope this will pave the way for a celebratory mood next year. Chamgono, CGTN.
Well, meanwhile, Nigerian Muslims joined their counterparts across the world in marking Eid al-Adha, the festival that honors acts of obedience and sacrifice. Well, CGTN's Kelechi Mekalom reports that some Muslims went the extra mile and carried out acts of kindness for their communities.
Thousands of Muslim faithfuls converge in Dutse Alaji, a community in the Nigerian capital, Abuja. Many here are poor and can't afford to mark their most important religious assignment, called the Feast of Sacrifice. It's an obligation philanthropists here, known as the Wise House, are helping them achieve. For the past 4 years, the Wise House team have provided Muslims in this community with animals for slaughter, and this year is no different.
We cut animals, we cut sheep, we cut goats, and then cows, just to help our Muslim brothers. Always we do this just for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
The animals are slaughtered and shared, and many are delighted to leave with food sufficient enough to take care of their families.
The joy we have today is we've been given 2 cows in our community. Usually we eat our food without meat because we can't afford it. But now we have enough meat and foodstuffs to go round.
The festival of sacrifice is held to honor Abraham, or Ibrahim's obedience to God's command to sacrifice his son. However, God provided a lamb in his stead. But it's also a time for many like the Wise House to care for those in need and give them a sense of belonging. Kelechi Mekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
And let's go to the United States now, where there's been an increase in sales of bulletproof backpacks for children in the wake of mass shootings in El Paso and Dayton last weekend. American companies selling the items say they're catering to heightened demand from parents during the back-to-school shopping season. But critics argue they are using tragedy as a marketing opportunity and exploiting parents' worst fears. CGTN's Brian Toussaint brings us more on this story.
This is the type of backpack I would normally...
Safety is high on the minds of many parents, especially after the El Paso, Texas and Dayton, Ohio shootings that left 31 people dead.
This shouldn't have to come to selling bulletproof backpacks. That just goes to show what type of society we live in today.
Steve Naramore founded Houston-based Tuffy Packs in late 2015. This was after his daughter, a 4th grade teacher, told him about the frequency of active shooting drills for her students.
When you get an assault rifle with a .223 or a .556, it'll go through this like hot knife through a butter.
Tuffy Packs markets its products on its website with mass shootings in mind.
Some of them say to me, and I agree with them, I can't believe the world has come to this. I have to send my child to school with a bulletproof backpack. The other half say, you know, it's something that is probably necessary in the event, you know, that there is an active shooter incident.
Yasir Sheikh, CEO of Guard Dog Security Products, says his company also produces some bullet-resistant backpacks. However, the bulk of his business is in removable ballistic shields that are inserted into backpacks.
We've definitely seen a spike over the past week or so in the sales, and that could be attributed to back to school, but it also could be attributed to some of the national events that are happening as well.
And its backpacks don't come cheap. Tuffy-Pack's shields range in price from $129 to $149.
I'm willing to spend that much money. Do I have that much money to spend on it? No, I do not. But am I willing to work the hours and the time to do what I have to do as a mother to protect my child? I will.
Educational experts say bullet-resistant backpacks are not the solution. Still, the makers of bullet-resistant backpacks have tapped into a fear that is real. And for parents feeling helpless and looking for an answer, the backpacks provide them with one. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
Now, while Africa's economic growth is positive, its most important asset remains largely untapped due to unemployment. Africa has the world's largest youth population, but most of them are unemployed, and this has resulted in migration and security challenges across the continent. As the world marks International Youth Day today, we take a look at just how severe the problem has become. Here's more from CGTN's Robert Nagila.
Africa has the world's youngest population. Its youth population is expanding rapidly and is expected to be over 800 million by 2050. According to the African Union, there are over 420 million youth aged between 15 and 35 years. Of this number, only 1 in 6 is in wage employment. It is estimated that 90% of Africa's youth live in low to lower middle income countries. Their biggest challenge is the lack of formal jobs. The African Development Bank says between 10 to 12 million youth enter the workforce each year. However, only 3.1 million jobs are created, leaving a majority to seek work in the informal sector. This fuels migration out of Africa to Europe and contributes to conflict on the continent. In 2016, AFDB developed a strategy which aims to create 25 million jobs and reach over 50 million Africans. Titled Jobs for Youth in Africa, it expects to achieve its target by driving inclusive growth across the continent and equipping youth to realize their full economic potential. For this to happen, countries need to align their policies with African Union initiatives and tap into their youth population. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, for more on this, let's bring you some analysis. I'm joined from Lagos, Nigeria by Yusuf Kelani, the former acting president of the National Youth Council of Nigeria, and in Johannesburg, Tawanda Makombo, a researcher at the South African Institute of Race Relations. Tawanda, I want to start with you in Johannesburg. Now, the theme for this year's International Youth Day is making education more relevant, equitable, and inclusive. Tawanda, in your view, what role does education play in determining Africa's future?
Well, education is important, especially for the youth, because they say education is the key to success. And we need the youth who are educated because they are the leaders of tomorrow. And for them to be able to make proper decisions in the future, they have to be intelligent, and intelligence comes from being educated. But however, the problem is that it's not just about education right now, but it's also about the opportunities that will come after a person is educated. The question is, are there those opportunities? And we can find out that there are no existing opportunities, even to those ones who are educated right now.
Yes. Yusuf, let's come to you on that note. Of course, this question of education is great, and we're even seeing improvements in enrollment rates. But where would you say are some of the most problematic gaps in the system? Because ultimately it's producing many graduates or young people whose skills do not meet the workforce requirements.
The problem is that the youth are getting educated, yes, but there are no jobs out there. And you can also find out that even those few jobs that are available, they want experience which is not available. They'll say they want someone with 5 years experience, whereby this youth is just coming back from university and they don't have enough experience. So I think that's the problem that is being faced out there.
Thank you so much, Tawanda. I just want to pose this next question now to our guest in Lagos, Yusuf. Let's look at the fact that, you know, we talk about Africa's population growing by 2050, the youth population growing to about 830 million people. And there is some debate over whether this spells promise or peril. Yusuf, what is your view in light of the fact that youth account for the largest group of migrants making dangerous journeys from Africa across the Mediterranean, and youth are also the majority recruits into armed militant groups on the continent?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's quite a pathetic situation that we have at the moment, and the future looks bleak, except we have to implore our government to actually do more as regards education. It's true, we have youth migrants out of Africa, and these are as a result of actions of some of the leaders who are more concerned about their political activities other than the plan for the young people in the nearest future. Our education is such that as it is now, we focus less on vocational education, where youth can acquire skills to help in producing, for local, production of items needed in the country, especially in the African continent. Because at the moment, we rely more on importation of these things from out there because we lack the expatriates and the technical know-how in doing these things. And then for us to actually to be able to meet up and plan for the future, because yes, like you said, the population of the young people will be on the increase, but then we need to put in place certain, facilities that will assist the youth once they are out of school. It's one thing to go to the university to get educated. It's one thing to graduate and then meet, something that you'll be actively involved in, and that is what the government needs to do. On youth migration is quite a very painful scenario as it is, and the African government needs to do more at home. Everything is not politics. Think of the economic, benefits to your country. And we need to do that. We are blessed with a lot of vegetation and so many commercial activities that we can go in. We need to begin to think towards that so that we engage the young people. The problem is everywhere. And there are some other countries in Africa who are having crisis issues, wars and the likes and things like that. And we need to do everything possible because the outsiders will not do that for us. We have to do these things for ourselves. Indeed. We have to face them. And we have to plan for the youth, not just for them to go to the university and graduate, but after graduation, they need to be active. Because we do not have this now, that is the reason why we are having that influx of people moving out of the country, going into Europe, and, they put their life at risk and the likes. So the government of every African nation must be able to put some proactive, action plan that will add value to these young people so that we plan for the future.
And coming back to you, Tawanda, in Johannesburg, when it comes to these action plans that government is responsible for, do you think that young people are included enough or participating enough in fact, being involved in crafting their own youth agenda?
Well, I don't know if I should say that the youth are ignorant or they are not educated enough to know the importance of them being engaged in that process. Because to a lesser extent, the youth are involved or even at all have anything to do with the youth agendas that are being formulated out there. So I think we need the civic society groups and the government to be involved in educating the youth so that they will know the need to be able to, for them to be able to participate.
Thank you. And Yusuf, finally coming back to you once again in Lagos, When it comes to youth inclusion in African politics, what trends do you foresee going forward?
Well, I think African leaders need to accept the youth as part of those to assist in putting in place good economic policies and also assist in governance. It's quite unfortunate that in African nations, the youth are facing challenges. We all see what's happening in South Sudan, in Tunisia, even right here in my country, where the youth are totally neglected. And as young people, we are not supposed to cry for this because we have about 60 to 65 of the population. It is our right. It's what we should do. But then we will not want to do that with some level of force. But then we'll continue to appeal to the leaders that they need to create the space for the young people. The young people are those that will contribute, that will build the nation. They have the highest population, and the workforce consists of people between age 20 and 45. And these are the productive, workforce of the nation, and they need to create their space and allow them improve in the quality of life of the country. So we just have to appeal to our politicians in Africa as it is, and we need to think and understand the fact that no great nation attained that success using external culture. You have to come in, look at what you have, look at your tradition, your norms, your values, and see how you input it into the Western civilization. So you don't allow Western civilization to overtake the general philosophy of the African continent.
Yes.
And we need to plan for the young people. So the government should just allow the youth their space, allow them come in. Let us preach against xenophobic attacks going on in different parts of the country, not just South Africa alone. The migration of young people from outside the continent is as a result of our government not putting in place adequate plan to take care of these young people.
Yes.
And these are the things we need to advocate. And we need a lot of the agencies to come in and assist and let us engage the young people, especially in skill acquisition.
Right.
And that is what will aid local content, growth in the industries in our countries. And I think that is what we should do. We have to continue to advocate for that. And we will relent. We will relent.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Yusuf Kelani, joining us there live from Lagos, Nigeria. And also thank you to Tawanda Makombo, joining us from Johannesburg.
Chirping of birds, sounds of whispering trees, burbling of streams. When sunlight sets the forest's leaves aglow, and waterfall surges down from the mountain, we see and hear the Earth's wondrous beauty. The Earth is meant to be appreciated, and the life of its inhabitants deserves our endless exploration. Come with CGTN to listen and see, in chorus of life, to marvel at nature and life.
You're watching Africa Live. Here's what's coming up in your business news. G7 countries and the IMF to support China against currency manipulation claims by the US. The Kingdom of Eswatini to cut ministers' allowances as it seeks to revive its economy.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In your business news, China is unlikely to face serious consequences from a US decision to label Beijing a currency manipulator. That's given the apparent lack of G7 and IMF support for Washington's move. The head of the IMF's China department, James Daniel, on Friday stood by the fund's assessment that the value of the yuan was in line with economic fundamentals. Former U.S. Treasury official Fred Bergston agreed. Bergston said there was no chance that any G7 country would support the U.S. because there is no evidence that China was manipulating its currency. Well, in other developments, the yuan's exchange rate was also a major focus in the latest quarterly monetary policy report from China's central bank. The report released on Friday said the yuan's weakening to over 7 per US dollar was triggered by market fluctuations that stemmed from trade worries. The People's Bank of China said that it would deepen the market-orientated exchange rate reforms to keep its currency flexible and stable. The reforms will include selling yuan-denominated bills in Hong Kong on a more regular basis, and that's to improve the yield curve of yuan-denominated bonds in the Hong Kong market. Analysts say the move could also help buy back the yuan from offshore markets, thus stabilizing its exchange rate. The Kingdom of Eswatini is looking at cutting housing, travel and entertainment allowances for cabinet ministers as part of attempts to revive the economy. This according to recommendations of a royal commission tasked with investigating how politicians are remunerated in the country formerly known as Swaziland. The report also recommends the cancellation of first-class travel for ministers, only allowing Prime Minister Ambrose Mamvolo Dlamini and his deputy to enjoy the luxury. Eswatini Finance Minister Neil Reichenberg said in February that the kingdom was facing an unprecedented economic crisis and was set to continue faltering as it faces slowing rates of foreign investment and a fast-growing wage bill. Overfishing is devastating Ghana's sea territory. The United Nations estimates that nearly 10% of the country's total population depend heavily on the crucial sector. But now, in attempts to preserve its fish stocks, the Ghanaian government has temporarily shut down fishing for industrial trawlers. From Accra, here's CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai.
Fishermen at Jamestown Beach in Accra have just returned from fishing. They didn't catch much, even though this period is the best time for fishing.
Things are bad these days. We went fishing since last night, but came back with just a few catch and lots of plastic waste in our nets.
Ghana's coastlines have been devastated by the side effects of economic expansion. According to campaign group the Environmental Justice Foundation, pollution and overfishing is responsible for the depletion of 1/3 of fish species here. Experts estimate that these practices off the coast of West Africa cost the affected countries around $1 billion a year. The government banned fishing for artisanal fishermen from May to June in order to preserve stocks. It has also banned industrial trawlers from fishing between August and September. These industrial vessels are blamed for the overfishing.
This is one big measure that we are trying to do to revamp our dwindling stocks. Other measures are to ensure that all the fishing vessels or the canoes comply with our regulations, our fisheries laws, so that they stay away from illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing.
Ghana had to import $135 million worth of fish in 2016 because of depleted domestic stocks.
The fishing industry in Ghana is critical to the country's economy and the food needs of its people. But experts say the use of illegal nets, which indiscriminately catch juvenile fish before they spawn, is becoming more widespread. And those destructive methods are depleting fish stocks.
Experts say the 2-month ban for industrial trawlers may not necessarily yield the desired results.
We have a challenge in terms of how we plan it and how we are executing it. And so you are not able to get the benefits immediately. Because you see, the trawl sector is going on closure between August and September, and artisanals are fishing. So even if the fish move to shallow waters to spawn, because artisanals are fishing, you are not likely to feel the impact. If you had a general closure for everybody, you are likely to do some measurement of the impact.
Amalfio says he wants the government to invest more in fishing sector research to effectively tackle the country's depleting fish stocks.
We don't have a research vessel, we don't have adequate research, we lack the technology. Even the gears that we use, we don't have a gear lab, we don't have gear technologies and all that. We need a lot of policy direction, because these are policy things.
Emmanuel Latte wants the government to do all it can to fix the country's depleting fish stock soon. He says he and the estimated 3 million people in Ghana whose livelihood depends on fishing don't want to lose their main occupation. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
And staying with the fish, Palestinians in Gaza are trying to end their reliance on Israeli fish imports as Tel Aviv continues to expand its command of the sea. Noor Harazin tells us more from Gaza.
Israel's blockade on the Gaza Strip has made it nearly impossible for local Palestinian fishermen to make a living these days, as fishermen are barred from fishing beyond 6 nautical miles from their coastline. For many here in Gaza, seafood is a basic meal, but Gaza is no longer rich in fish as it used to be, due to Israel's maritime blockade. The Palestinian Agriculture Ministry confirms the amount of fish caught daily represents less than 20% of the needs of Gaza residents. The appetite for local fish has promoted the opening of new private fish farms. The farms aim to supply local markets with another source of fish at affordable prices. Jum'a Badawi is the owner of Al-Bahar, one of the most successful of 4 fish farms in Gaza. His farm sits on a small rise above a beach and looks out over the front line of the Mediterranean Sea, alongside its restaurant and aquarium.
We headed for the establishment of fish farms due to the Israeli naval blockade imposed on Gaza and the small quantities of bream. But we are facing other problems. As you know, the fish in the farms always need food. These feeds we import from the Israeli or Egyptian sides. When comparing with other countries, prices are very high for imports from Israel.
Despite the success of his project, Badawi says that his business faces mounting costs as he has to buy the required seeds and fish food from Israel twice a week. However, Palestinian engineer Wa'il Musallam found a solution to provide fish food locally. He worked on opening the first water farm for Azula in Gaza. Azula is a plant that grows in water and is used to feed fish. His project will greatly reduce the import of high-priced fish feed from Israel.
We are suffering from the high cost of fees in Gaza. Everything we produce is without profit. We have sought ideas to meet these challenges. Our friend Dr. Suhalayej introduced us to this Azola plant. We brought it to Gaza late last year. After a number of failed attempts, we succeeded and production is starting to improve.
Hoping to end Gaza's reliance on imports from Israel, fish farmers seem to have learned an important lesson from a historical Chinese proverb: give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. Noor Harazin, CGTN, Gaza.
Let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on Africa Live. A South African artist breathes life into the township with his art.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Semi Lubisi is a Johannesburg-based fine artist who specializes in street scenes inspired by ordinary township life. The artist uses watercolors, charcoal, ink and acrylics for his drawings and even collages. His work is well acclaimed, as CGTN's Yulisan Jamela reports.
Semi Lubisi started drawing when he was at primary school. This is where he says one of his teachers changed his life when he bought him a drawing book. Semi has no formal art education. He taught himself how to draw from reading art books and admiring the work of other artists. As a fine art artist, Semi specializes in street scenes. Semi's inspiration is derived from the lives of ordinary South Africans, from children playing in the townships to a sheer ambience of the movement of the citizens.
It's just random like pictures or random images of ordinary people from the township. I specialize in townships because that's where I grew up. I'm from the township, Ivory Park to be precise. So those are my everyday scenes that I used to see daily in the morning, in the afternoon and stuff like that. So I try to convey those images into art pieces to somehow express or tell my kind of a story.
The artist uses watercolors, charcoal, ink and acrylics for his drawings and sometimes collage.
My tools, I use predominantly charcoal. I have charcoal pencils and charcoal-like sticks that I use, and also bright colors. The bright colors give some sort of life into it and makes the artwork more attractive. And I also use, there and there, I use some collages like pieces of newspapers and magazines there and there, just to, give some sort of an effect into the artwork.
He says he learns every day from every stroke, and every critic's feedback is an opportunity to develop.
Yes, I can say that even now I'm still learning. One can never stop learning. Each and every day when you try something new, it's a learning.
Semi's art thus far attracts both local and international clientele.
My artwork, I would say, it applies to the international market, like tourists when they come. As they take the tours to see the townships and all those kind of vibes, they somehow like to have something that's going to speak to them and say, I have experienced this kind of a place. So my art gives them that.
He now wants to impart his knowledge to young people in his township. Semi sells his own artwork. He's not attached to any gallery. Yulisan Jamila for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Saudi Arabia has been making gradual moves forward on women's rights. The country announced a number of legal reforms, including allowing women to obtain passports and travel abroad without the permission of a male relative. Officials say the changes are expected to provide Saudi women much greater control over their lives. CGTN's Li Chao has the story.
A year after lifting its ban on female drivers, Saudi Arabia has announced a new royal decree. It would allow Saudi women over the age of 21 to obtain passports and travel abroad without the permission of a male relative. The kingdom's latest legal reforms are expected to improve the lives of Saudi women, protecting them against employment discrimination, giving them greater autonomy over family matters, even allowing them to register birth, marriages, or divorces. This comes 8 years after Saudi women were first given the right to vote in local elections and even run for office.
I couldn't be happier. I was working when I found out about the royal decree, and I rushed to my friends to tell them about it. This is a wonderful beginning, a historical beginning. Even if it doesn't cover all we asked for, I'm still very happy about it.
Earlier this year, Princess Rima bint Bandar Al Saud was appointed as Saudi Arabia's newest ambassador to the United States. It made her the first female envoy in the kingdom's history. In a tweet, she called the latest legal reforms history in the making. While human rights advocates welcome the move, they say there's still a long way to go. For example, women still need the permission of a male relative to leave prison or women's shelters. However, one political observer says such restrictions will not last long. There is no difference between women in Saudi to those in China, the US, or the United Kingdom, except for their physical appearance. That's why they will find themselves and independence in the kingdom. The advancement of women's rights has been a key part of Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman's vision for reforms in the kingdom. In 2017, women were allowed to access government services such as education and healthcare without a consent of a guardian. In 2018, the number of women in the workforce jumped by 20%. During the G20 summit in June, Saudi Arabia pledged to participate in a women empowerment initiative aimed at reducing gender pay gaps. I'm personally very optimistic about the future of women's rights. I'm also very certain the Saudi society has realized the important role of women in building the country. We cannot only rely on men. We're admitting that both genders are equally important.
And coming up in your sports news. A group of Egyptian footballers with dwarfism are itching for competitions to prove their mettle.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We begin with English Premier League action. Manchester United handed Chelsea a 4-0 thumping at Old Trafford in their opening match of the new season. Chelsea were quick off the blocks, with Tammy Abraham hitting the